Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we have an episode of Crushing Quarters. On episodes like these, I build a deck with the smallest of budgets. Outside the Commander, every single card in this deck has to be 25 cents or less at the time of this recording. At the end of the episode, you'll still see that overall deck cost with the shipping included as well as the Commander. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused Commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGplayer affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Today's Crushing Quarters commander is Marwyn the Nurturer. Marwyn is a 1/1 elf druid that costs 2 and a green. She has whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn the Nurturer. And by tapping her, you add an amount of green to your mana pool equal to her power. So with Marwyn, you're typically going to see an elf tribal build around her. But we're going to be taking things in a slightly different direction today. In an elf build, Marwyn can tap for a good amount of mana, but we've got some ways to get even more out of her. The higher that we can get her power, the more mana we get out of her, and if we can untap her, we can do it again. So this deck's going to focus on pumping Marwyn, untapping her, and generating an absurd amount of mana in one turn. This kind of a build is a good candidate for a Crushing Quarters deck because there are a ton of cheap untapped spells out there. So like I said, our strategy for this deck is going to be to pump and untap Marwyn over and over again. The higher that we can get her power, the more that we get out of every single time we untap her. And then how do we win with this deck? Well, we're going to use Marwyn's power and mana to demolish opponents. We can easily get Marwyn's power over 21 for a one-shot kill, or we've got plenty of other ways that we can use her mana to take them all out at once. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start things off with tactic number 1, Elf on the Shelf. So as I said before, this isn't an elf tribal build, but we're still running a few elves that can be helpful in this deck. First up, we're running both Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic that both can tap for a green. If either of these come down on turn 1, we're getting Marwyn down on turn 2, which is huge. And then we're running Elvish Visionary and Multani's Acolyte, which essentially do the exact same thing. Both are going to draw us a card when they come into play. However, if we want to keep Multani's Acolyte around, we have to pay its echo cost. And finally, we're also running Voice of Many, which is going to draw us a card for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than us. We are running a decent amount of creatures in this deck, so chances are we'll at least get a few cards off of this. And again, when any of these come down, Marwyn's going to get a +1/+1 counter because these are elves. We've got some much more effective ways at pumping Marwyn. So now let's move on to tactic number 2, Pump It Up. First up, there's Blanchwood Armor, which is going to give Marwyn +1/+1 for each forest we control. Almost all of our lands are forests, so this is going to pump Marwyn for a ton throughout the game. And again, since the more we pump Marwyn, the more mana she taps for, we're really not losing any mana from casting this. And if we have more than 3 forests in play, we're actually going to be gaining mana from casting this. Next up, we've got some even bigger auras with Epic Proportions and Prodigious Growth. Epic Proportions has Flash, and it gives Marwyn +5/+5 in Trample. And Prodigious Growth might not have Flash, but it does get +7/+7 in Trample. So both of these are fantastic ways to raise Marwyn's power quickly, and that trample can come in huge. Next up, there's Soul's Might, which is going to put X +1/+1 counters on target creature where X is that creature's power. So essentially, whatever Marwyn's power is, this is going to double it. And finally, there's Gigantiform, which says Enchanted creature has base power and toughness 8/8 and has trample. So basically, this is a +7/+7 to Marwyn since she starts off as a 1/1. But we've got some more ways to pump our commander as well as our other creatures too. So let's move on to tactic number 3, Temporary Strength. First up, there's Creeper Hulk, which has pay 1 and a green until end of turn. Target creature you control has base power and toughness 5/5 against trample. And then Gigantomancer is similar. It has pay 1. Target creature you control has base power and toughness 7/7 until end of turn. So both of these might be temporary effects, but they can be a great boost to Marwyn's power or to other creatures on our team. And although there is a mana cost for both of these abilities, we will actually be netting mana when we use them on Marwyn. Once we're set up, some effects that can be even bigger come from Sacred Armory, Elder of Laurels, and Wildheart Invoker. Sacred Armory has pay 2. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Elder of Laurels says pay 3 and a green. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. And Wildheart Invoker has pay 8. Target creature gets +5/+5 and gains trample until end of turn. It's going to make more sense once we get through our untapped cards, but each of these can be extremely effective in this deck. Essentially, they allow us to utilize the mana that we have with Marwyn more effectively. But the most effective version of these comes with our Golden Pig. The Golden Pig is going to be our number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Ursipine. Ursipine is a 3/3 beast that costs 3 green. By paying a green, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Ursipine is the Golden Pig for this deck because it allows us to utilize our mana perfectly. Let's say that Marwyn's power is at 6 and we've got 2 untapped spells in our hand that each cost 1. We tap Marwyn for 6 mana and we use 5 of that to give her +5/+5. We use the last remaining mana to cast one of our untapped spells and tap her again for 11 this time. We use 10 of that mana to put back into Ursipine to pump Marwyn by 10. With the remaining mana, we untap her again with our second untap spell. With that simple interaction, she's at 21 power and can tap for a ton or attack for a ton. And believe me, that is a very tame scenario compared to what can happen when we're set up correctly. As I said before, Ursipine lets us get the most of our mana, and that's why it's the Golden Pig. But now let's go over some of those untapped spells that we've been alluding to. So it's time for us to move on to tactic number 4, do that again. First up, there's Emerald Charm, which says choose 1, untap target permanent, destroy target non-aura enchantment, or target creature loses flying until end of turn. And then both Stony Strength and Burst of Strength do the exact same thing. They're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn and untap her. The great thing about a lot of these untapped cards is that they do pump Marwyn while they're untapping her. Next up, we've got 2 more untapped spells that cost 1 with Vines of the Recluse and Ornamental Courage. Vines gives +1/+2 in reach, and Ornamental Courage gives +1/+3. And then we've got some untapped spells that cost 2 with Aim High, Savage Surge, and Gift of Growth. All these are going to give +2/+2, but Gift of Growth can give +4/+4 if we've kicked it, and most of the time we want to do that. Again, the more that we can pump Marwyn, the more mana she can tap for the next time we tap her. And then we've got some slightly less efficient but still very effective cards in this deck with Steady Aim, Ruthless Instincts, and Colossal Heroics. Steady Aim is going to give +1/+4 in reach while untapping. Ruthless Instincts is just going to give reach and Death Touch while untapping. And Colossal Heroics can give any number of target creatures +2/+2 and untap them. We have a few creatures where it's worth to pay that extra 2 for them. Next up, there's Touch of Vitae, which is an older card and it's worded in a weird way, so here's the Oracle text. Until end of turn, target creature gains haste and pays 0. Untap this creature, activate this ability only once, draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. And then Spidery Grasp gives +2/+4 in reach while untapping. And Synchronized Strike untaps up to 2 target creatures and they each get +2/+2 until end of turn. Again, there are some creatures in this deck that are worth untapping outside of our commander. And finally, we're running Dragonscale Boon and Great Oak Guardian. Dragonscale Boon's going to put 2 +1/+1 counters on Marwyn and untap her. And Great Oak Guardian has Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls gets +2/+2 until end of turn and untap them. Now we've gone through a ton, but we're not quite done with untapping just yet. So let's move on to tactic number 5, one more time. First up, let's talk about those other creatures that we don't mind untapping. Finehorn Brownie has pay 2 and a green, tap it to untap target creature. And then Elder Druid has pay 3 and a green, tap it to tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land. So both these are repeatable ways to untap Marwyn for a minimal cost. And Elder Druid can actually go infinite too with a card that we'll talk about later since it can untap a land. But next up, let's talk about Jandor's Saddlebags, which we can pay 3 to tap it to untap target creature. Again, the more ways that we have to untap Marwyn, the better. So we're also running Copperhorn Scout, which has, when it attacks, untap each other creature you control. And then Curse of Bounty is very similar to this. It's an Aura Curse, and it says whenever enchanted player is attacked, untap all non-land permanents you control. Each opponent attacking that player untaps all non-land permanents he or she controls. Even if by attacking means that we lose one of our creatures, it's going to be well worth it for that untap most of the time. A card that is absolutely absurd in this deck, though, is a pretty old one with Malachite Talisman. It says whenever a player casts a green spell, you may pay 3. If you do, untap target permanent. With this in play, things can get out of control very quickly. Each and every single one of our green spells becomes an extra untap spell if we pay an extra 3. And again, as soon as we get Marwyn's power high enough, it's going to be well worth it to do that every single time. Also, keep in mind that we can use this whenever an opponent casts a green spell too. But to keep things going, we need to make sure that we can keep drawing into these cards. So now let's move on to tactic number 6, Fuel for the Fire. First up, there's Key of the City, which helps us out in multiple ways. By tapping it and discarding a card, up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. And then whenever Key of the City becomes untapped, we can pay 2, and if we do, we draw a card. Essentially, this can help us make Marwyn unblockable, and it can also help us loot too. Next up, there's Colossal Majesty, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Obviously, in this deck, it's very easy for us to get Marwyn's power up to 4. Next up, we've got some artifacts that can help us with drawing with Horn of Plenty, Lore Seeker Stone, and Sandstone Oracle. Horn of Plenty says whenever a player casts a spell, they may pay 1. If that player does, they draw a card at the beginning of the next end step. Now, this will help our opponents out as well, but on a budget like this, we'll take what we can get when it comes to card draw. And then Lore Seeker Stone has pay 3 and tap it to draw 3 cards. This ability costs 1 more to activate for each card in your hand. Next up, there's Sandstone Oracle, which when it enters the battlefield, we choose an opponent, and if that player has more cards in hand than us, we draw cards equal to the difference. And then there's Hunter's Prowess, which can draw us a ton of cards at once. It says until end of turn, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. Once we get Marwyn's power up enough, we can deal an absurd amount of damage with this and draw a ton of cards from it. But the best way to draw cards in this deck has got to be with Season of Growth. It says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. And then whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature you control, draw a card. So each and every single one of our untapped spells, and some other spells too, will draw us cards. But outside of drawing, we've got other ways to make sure that we can cast more untapped spells in a turn. So now let's move on to tactic number 7, Good Memories. First up, there's Revive, which says return target green card from your graveyard to your hand, and Regrowth says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Most of the time, we're going to use either of these to get back an untapped spell so we can keep things going. Next up, we've got 2 ways to get 2 cards back with Once and Future in restock. Recursion shouldn't be underestimated, especially in this deck. But our best mass recursion spell is Wildest Dreams, which costs XX and a green and says return X target cards from your graveyard to your hand, exile Wildest Dreams. All the mana that we put into this is going to be well worth it for the amount of spells that we can get back with this. And finally, there's Conqueror's Galleon, which has, when it attacks, exile at the end of combat and then return to the battlefield transformed under your control. It transforms into the land Conqueror's Foothold. It can tap for a color, so we can pay 2 to tap it and loot, we can pay 4 to tap it and draw, or we can pay 6 to tap it and return target card from our graveyard to our hand. Repeatable recursion is huge, and we are more than willing to pay that 6 mana to get back one of our untapped spells. This is actually the card that I was referring to earlier when I talked about Elder Druid going infinite with a land. If we can get Marwyn's power high enough, we can keep getting back a spell that untaps 2 creatures, we can keep going with this. It can also work if we have Malachite Talisman on the field too. Because this deck heavily depends on its commander, we need some ways to help her out. So now let's move on to tactic number 8, Commanding Position. First up, there's Fleet Feather Sandals, which gives Marwyn flying and haste. So flying can definitely help us get her through and swing for lethal, and haste can help her start right away. Next up, there's Seething Charm, which says choose 1, return target or attach to a creature to its owner's hand, regenerate target green creature, or target creature gains trample until end of turn. So this is a very flexible card that can help us out in a lot of situations. And then Withstand Death is going to give her Indestructible, and Mortal's Resolve gives her +1/+1 and Indestructible too. Next up, we're running Alpha Authority, which says enchanted creature has hexproof and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So this not only protects Marwyn, but it also works really well with trample. Next up, we're running 3 Umbras with Spider, Snake, and Boar. Each of these has totem armor, so if Marwyn would be destroyed, instead we remove all damage from her and destroy this aura. It's kind of like a get out of jail free card. On top of that, Spider Umbra gives her +1/+1. Snake Umbra also gives her +1/+1, and whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. And then Boar Umbra gives her +3/+3. Finally, there's Fortitude, which is a fantastic repeatable way to protect Marwyn. It has Sacrifice the Forest, regenerate enchanted creature, and when Fortitude is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Fortitude to its owner's hand. Now, protecting Marwyn is very important, but we also have to make sure that we can deal with our opponent's things too. So let's move on to tactic number 9, Keep It Simple. First up, there's Naturalize, which destroys target artifact or enchantment. And then Return to Nature can do the same, or can exile target card from a graveyard. Next up, there's Realize our Exarch, and when it enters the battlefield, we choose 1. We can search our library for a creature card, reveal it, then shuffle our library and put that card on top of it. Or we can put target non-creature permanent on the bottom of its owner's library. So this can either be a great tutor or a fantastic piece removal for the stack. But now let's talk about the endgame and how we finish off our opponents. So it's time for us to move on to tactic number 10, Big Finish. First up, there's Bellowing Tangleworm, which has Intimidate, and other green creatures you control have Intimidate. So essentially, all of our green creatures, including our commander, can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and green creatures. So this either makes them unblockable or very hard for our opponents to block. Our commander can easily be a one-shot kill, and our other creatures aren't going to be slouches either. Again, with something like Gigantomancer or Urzapine on the field, we can easily pump our other creatures as well. Next up, there's Centaur Glade, which has pay 2 green, put a 3/3 green Centaur creature token into play. This can help us with a go-wide strategy if we need it by creating a huge army of centaurs. And finally, there's Hurricane, which in the right situation can easily finish off all of our opponents at once. It's going to deal X damage to each creature with flying and each player. So as long as we have the highest life total and enough mana, we can finish off all of our opponents at once. But now that we've gone through the spells in this deck, let's go on to the mana base. First up, we're running 3 Cycling Lands with Tranquil Thicket, Desert of the Indomitable, and Slippery Karst. Next up, there's Treetop Village, which can turn to a 3/3 with Trample if we pay 1 and a green. And the rest of our mana base is very simple, we just have 29 forests. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Marwyn the Nurturer EDH rec deck will set you back $204.74. Our deck is much more affordable, coming at the low price of $9.90. And keep in mind that this price even includes the shipping cost. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are about to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, let's add in Wildwood Lounge by taking out a forest. Next up, we're adding in Vitalize by taking out Ruthless Instincts. And then we're adding in Garruk Primal Hunter by taking out Horn of Plenty. Next up, let's add in Soul's Majesty by taking out Colossal Majesty. And then we're adding in Rishkar's Expertise by taking out Elvish Visionary. Finally, let's add in Return of the Wild Speaker by taking out Maltani's Acolyte. And now it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what you think about this deck and what you think about the commander in general. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck tags. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tag dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.